Kumlan Ablav Gemara. Today, Friday's Gemara is Daf Chav Dalet. So the last thing we learned was that each one can disqualify the other person's aiding, perhaps an argument of Meir Chachamim, and so too the judges. And we explained that Shlokish came along and says, "Pek Kodesh Yom Malay." How in the world can be that a mayor would say that I can disqualify the witnesses, and he therefore amended it to say Eidoy, his witness. We gave different other interpretations, but that's what Reish Lakish said. What actually repeated what Reish Lakish said. But let's go Gufa, the Chavdal and Aleph, about 12 lines from the top of the page. Gufa, let's analyze this. Abba Reish Lakish says, Peh Kodesh Yein Medavas. That's a question mark. Such a holy person like a mayor would say something like this. It's not sensible. How can you just go ahead and disqualify somebody else's witnesses? You're undermining the whole foundation, very, very fabric of a court system. So he said, therefore, Tni Eidoy, in singular, it's only single aid, you're only disqualifying one aid. Says Gemara, Eini, it's not so. Omar Ula, didn't Ula say, Haroyes Reish Lakish, Beis Medrash, anybody witnessed Reish Lakish learning Beis Medrash, they would have noticed, Kilo Oiked Hadi, but he was so sharp. He was like completely removing mountains, pulling out mountains, and grinding them against each other. In other words, if somebody is so sharp, he wouldn't be so polite and call them Pek Kodesh Yom over there. He would just completely reject Rameya's version, and that's it. So Gemara has difficulty with this statement. Amar Ravina says, you're right, the Shlokish is very sharp, but compared to Rameya was far sharper than the Shlokish. In fact, Rameya based on Medrash. Ravina once said, if anyone would have noticed, would have witnessed Rameya sitting and learning, Kilo Oiked Hare. Not only was he, completely uprooting mountains, but he was uprooting mountains on top of mountains, way more than the Shlokish, and Teichen grinding against each other. And therefore, there's nothing wrong with the Shlokish being polite to Rab Meir. In fact, we look more at that Yukimo, that Rab Meir was so smart that nobody could understand, exceedingly smart, and therefore the halacha is not like him because nobody could fully appreciate what he said. So Gemara said, this is what he meant to say. Not that it was a question mark, it's a statement. They loved each other, they respected each other, revered each other. So look how much they revered each other. They give an example. Rebbe's one sitting, and he said, on Shabbos, you're not allowed to to store something in chamin and hot because the scared you might heat it up first before you put it in. So he went further and said, nor should you put cold things in to maintain the cold because then you won't be able to distinguish between the two and mistakes can arise. Amal the father Rabbi Shmuel, but Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Yasi came along to him and said, Abba, my father, he did lahat minas actually permitted when it comes to cold, he permitted it. Amalei, so Rabbi right away acknowledged that and he said, he said, well, in that case, an old person already the zaken. Rabbi Yasi paskind, and so be it. We find the same expression in Mari Vamas. We had an argument there about where the Gemara discusses a chalitza about a man. If he gives chalitza to his brother's wife after her brother passed away, instead of marrying her, giving yibum, he gives chalitza, untying shoe and all that. And then a man has to be over 13. But when it comes to the woman, Rebbe wanted to say that it also has to be over bas mitzvah, but Rabbi Yasi came along and said, no, it doesn't have to be over bas mitzvah. And Rebbe said, well, Rabbi Yasi ruled, Rabbi Yasi ruled. By the way, it's a fascinating story there in the Gemara, what actually happened in that story there with Avdon and Rabbi Shmuel. Amar Papa said, boy, they come and say, look how much they agree with each other. Rabbi Yasi came, but Rabbi Yasi been alive, he would have been, he would have subjugated himself to Rebbe's jurisdiction. Rabbi Yasi himself would have listened to Rebbe, and yet to Rabbi Shmuel, but Rabbi Yasi, how do I know that? He filled the position of his father, the Malam Makam, so he was very similar to his father, and and yet he was subordinate to Rebbe. Even though we have other Gemara see that Rabbi Yasi was superior to Rebbe, but over time, perhaps Rabbi Yasi became subordinate to Rebbe when Rebbe became the Nasi. The Ka'amak Vaher and yet he acknowledged Vaher Zaken. So it shows you how the derech that they had for each other. It says the pasuk, it says, I'll take two sticks. I said, I'll call them sweet. I'll call them that they cause they damage. Noyim is referring to sweet. Elu Tamid Chachamim Shebet Yisrael. These are the Rabbanim B'Eretz Yisrael, where they respect each other and they have time to listen to each other. Shemanim is halacha, and therefore, because they sit and discuss and reconcile everything halacha, they come to the true halacha. Choyvu, who beat each other and they argue with each other, is Elu Tamidei Chachamim Shebabel Shebechablim Zeh Zeh Balacha. They're constantly attacking each other and continuing to query. No matter what you answer, you have another question on top of that question, one layer after another layer. So the Gemara, this Gemara here, Sanhedrin, it seems the Gemara is denigrating the style of learning in Bavel. The Gemara continues. These are the two sons of the oil that are standing, and prior that said, Shnaim, Zaysim, it says there were two olives. So Yitza, what's this oil? What's it referring to? Obviously, like Elu Tamid like oil. They're very calm with each other. So it's like olive oil. The two olives that are on it, on this tree, these olive trees, Elu Tamid that's referring to the Chamish of Babel. Why? They bit at each other. Kizai is like an olive. Now, sometimes some people say Kazayas means the olive, some people say Kazayas is actually the olive tree itself. And I lifted my eyes, and against Chai is saying this, I saw the two women, the are going out, the Ruach Bekanfeim have the wind under their wings. And they have wings like this bird of the Chasida, and these are two metaphors. And one is the wind under the wings is referring to hubris, arrogance, lifting up, and Kanfer Chasida is one who's pretending to be something they're not. As Gemara Seita said, the most threatening thing on the Chanofim that they pretend they masquerade as being very frum and they're not. Vatisa Enah Eifa, they lifted the Eifa ben Shmaimin of heaven and earth. I said to them, where they're transporting this Eifa. I said to me, leaving this Labayis to build it, to bid her a bayis, a house, but Edachin in the land above. Two women are Chanuf and Galkazruch, is arrogance. Chanuf is where you're pretending to be something you're not. She go to the bubble, they descended to bubble, the gas, we already asked, the gas is Saruach. The bubble, Nochis, gas Ruach went to bubble, we learned Asora Kavin gases Yodula. There were 10 Kavin, 10 measures of arrogance that descended to the world. Tisha Notla Ela. Persia took 9 of them. The Achaz Kola only one, the rest of the world was distributed equally. So bubble was not noted for that. Was it in? No. Yes, the bubble Nochis first descended to bubble. The Ishtar Bube, the Ishtar Le'elam. And from there on in, it moved to Elam. Take now prove it to you. See what it says, leaving this law by his Bereshim. Start off 2 women, but then he said, I'm building her only one woman. Only the seat of arrogance was a bubble. Shmamina, that's a valid proof. Said the Gemara, didn't we learn? Simen Megas is ruach. What's a good sign? That there's plenty of arrogance is aniyas, is poverty. And Vanias lebubble nochem. We know that the people in bubble were impoverished, and we learned, that's why they had to eat dates there and all that, because they were impoverished. My Anias, Gemara said, when it says there that Anias is a sign of arrogance, it's not poverty. It's talking about lack of knowledge, ignorance. Anias, trade. See, it says, we have a younger sister, she has no bosom. This is referring to Elam. Now, bosom represents nurturing others. And Elam, even though they studied Torah, and in Elam, Persia had Mordechai, Daniel, Zu Elam Lilma, they learned to teach. Even though in the story of Purim, Mordechai taught everyone, we're talking about perhaps prior to that, or post that. My Bavel, what's the name Bavel? Even though the Torah clearly says why it's called Bavel in the Pasha Derech. Amr Yechon Belula b'Mikra, Belula b'Mishnah, Belula b'Talmud, all mixed together. As Tosha says here, and in Kedushin. So if you learn Gemara, Talmud, Babli, you have it at everything that your person needs. You have it at Chumash, you have Mishnah, and you have Gemara. Then the Gemara concludes, famous Gemara, the Nechshakim Hashivani, place me in darkness, Kimesi Eilam, like those who died in this world. This is referring to the Talmud of Babel. And the way Rashi learns over here, it seems that it's a very derogatory way of describing the people of Babel, explaining that that we didn't learn properly because they don't really give each other the time of day. They're constantly arguing. That's what Rashi says over here. So it seems that it's very disparaging of the Amoraim of Babel versus the Amoraim in Eretz Yisrael. And however, and this is Rabbi Yirmiyah, and Rabbi Yirmiyah, actually, the number of cases turned around and says, Hani tipshoy the Babel, the fools of Babel. Now, Rabbi Yirmiyah himself came from Babel. Rabbi Yirmiyah himself came from Babel. And we have in a few Gemaras, the very interesting thing. We have a Gemara Ksubas Daf Ayin Hey, where the Gemara talks about how Eretz Yisrael is superior learning than the people in Babel. And they say that Yirmiyah, when he was in Babel, he himself was an inferior student. He had no understanding of what was going on in Babel. But when he went to Eretz Yisrael, he started to say, the Hani to show the Babel, because in Eretz Yisrael, he was smarter than all people of Eretz Yisrael. And the reason why, generally speaking, people in Eretz Yisrael are smarter, because it says over there that Echad Menayu Ketrei Delon. In other words, in Eretz Yisrael, they were smarter than us. Either the Rishonim explained because of the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael, or because we learned in the end of Obasa, Avila Yisrael Machkim, that the Aver Yisrael, just the climate, makes you smarter. And but Rabbi Yirmiyah had the training in Babel, and then he went to Yisrael, get the best of both worlds. So he was far smarter. However, Rashi, in the Gemara Chagiga, Daf Yudam and Aleph, and Tosfos and others, Tosfos Rid, they learned just the opposite. That the Gemara, they said, Shas l'Shas, if you go from one Shas to another Shas, it's not healthy for you. And the Rashi says it from Shalmi to Babli, because Babli is so deep. Shalmi in a way is like Shalom. Ask a question, give an answer, you move on. In Babli, they don't let go. Like a bull terrier, they keep on asking and asking and asking. They don't stop until they tease out the final emes l'amitai, and that is why the halacha is like the Babli. And in fact, we need to reconcile Rashi here, where he seems to say that he downplayed the learning in Babel versus Rashi in Chagiga, where he says how the learning in Babel was far greater than the learning in Eretz Yisrael. Says the Mishnah, what happens? He says to him, then Olai Abba, my father is believed to be a judge, your father, I accept, even though they have a disqualification related, I accept it. Then he says, then I accept, I trust three shepherds. And we're not talking about shepherds who are Gadavim, we're talking about shepherds who just are ignoramuses. But I accept them as the Yonim. And Meir says, Yochalach, because they have deficiency. And it's only my acceptance that gave them the capability of judging. So I can change my mind. Whether you can change your mind even after you gave the psak or just prior to the psak, we'll see more later in argument. And the Chachamim say, any Yochalach, Chachamim say, you cannot change your mind. That's number one. What happens? Hoya chayiv l'chavei shvua. Let's say you owed your friend a shvua. So the way we are going to understand it right now, and we'll discuss whether that's right, is where the person is going to swear and going to be absolved. For example, you were asking me for $100, the plaintiff is asking $100. The defendant says, you owe me 50. So he has to make a line that mixes. He has to swear in the balance, and if he swears he doesn't owe it, he doesn't have to pay it. So the shvua exonerates him from paying. So what happens? He says, the defendant owed a shvua to the plaintiff, and he said to him, and he said to him, just swear to me, and instead of making a shvur of bezdin that you don't owe me the balance, just swear to me on your life, which is a far lighter shvur. No, there's no sefer Torah, there's no the whole surrounding and the props that go along with a shvur, which are extremely intimidating, are not present. And he said, if you make a shvur and you don't have to pay me. I'm moichel you. The mayor says, you can still change your mind. You cannot change your mind. So the case that we just gave you is a case where the plaintiff says to the defendant, swear a lighter shvur and I'm moichel. There's another possibility that it's the other way around. Sometimes the plaintiff swears and collects. We had the beginning of Mitzvah that the storekeeper, where the employer said to the store, give my employee the money, that's his wages. The store and the storekeeper said, I gave him. The employees had never received it. In this case, both of them swear and they collect. They both swear and they collect respectively. So there's a shvua where you take. That's called etzimlach. And what happens if the owner, the employer says, you know what, instead of making this very strict shvua, make a lighter shvua, and I'll pay you. So what happens in that case over there? In the case of etzimlach, can I change my mind or not? Or only in that case, who is the one who's swearing? The plaintiff or the defendant? Chachamim ain't, is a shvur there to absolve you, or the shvur there is to enable you to take. And then we'll discuss that. Chachamim ain't yochalav, you cannot change your mind. Abdima came along and said that it's talking about that this dayan, the father or your father, even though the two other qualified judges, I'm accepting your father only as one of the judges. And Madach, in this case, Reb Meir says you can change your mind. Surely in the case of all three judges were not qualified. Surely you could change your mind. Now here we have an interesting argument. That Yehuda says in Shmuel, this whole machlekes is between Meir and Chachamim, whether you can change your mind or not. And Reb Meir says that you can still change your mind, and Chacham say you cannot, is only b'machalach. With the plaintiffs, the defendant had to swear and exonerate himself. And the plaintiff says, you know what, instead of making this very stringent shvur, make a lighter shvur, make a lighter shvur. Forget about Sefer Torah and all that. Make a lighter shvur. And I'll be meichel you. You don't have to pay. Oh, so therefore, the machlekes is in the case of machalach. Or, let's say in the case of the judges. Not in the case of, we're talking about the first part of the Mishnah. In the first part of the Mishnah is where he says to him, you know what, I accept your father, and if your father decides that you are potter, I accept that. You are potter. I'll be for you. So then the Rabbanan said, look, they're arguing about machalach, but why? Because since as soon as you meichel the person, you can no longer change your mind. Aval be'etelach, and that's what Chacham says you cannot change your mind. But be'etelach, but in the case where, let's say, let's say the defendant said to if the defendant, for example, says to the plaintiff, accept your father, and if your father says, I have to pay you, I'll pay you. I'm happy to pay. Then everyone agrees. Then everyone holds you can change your mind because it hasn't happened yet. In other words, by mechila, the question is when I say I forgive you, you don't have to pay. There's two ways of understanding it. One way is I'm giving you the money. I'll give you the money you owe me. I'm going to give it to you. Maybe slow with me, but I'm going to give it to you. Other way is I'm walking away from it. If you learn mechila, I'm walking away from it. The moment I said I'm meichel you, I'm walking away from it. Then you can no longer change your mind. Because I removed any connection between myself and that money. But if the word is that I'm going to give it as if I'm giving it to you, then I haven't given to you yet. So I can still change my mind. And that's the machlek Reb Meir Chachamim. But if it clearly says etzem lecha, if the defendant says if the court finds you that you're right and I owe you the money, I'll pay you. Since I haven't given to you yet, I can definitely change my mind. It goes to everybody. That's one way of understanding. However, Rabbi Yochanan says no, the whole machlekes revolves around etzach I'll give you. But if he actually said, and what about if he said I'm meichel you? Could be, we'll see in a minute. Could be that everyone will agree that you cannot change your mind because mechila means I'm walking away. You walked away. You walked away. But he didn't spell that out. So the Gemara will try to tease it out. What would Rabbi Yochanan hold in the case where he says that if the court's find in your favor, you don't have to pay me the money. I will meichel you. What happens then? The machlekes about pay you. I will and you can't change your mind. I do a favor to them. The Amar Rava said, machlekes. The machlekes is be'et l'chad. Machlekes is I will pay you. Aval b'machalcha. But in the case where he says I'm meichel you, everyone agrees. Ain't yochel lachs, but everyone agrees. You cannot change your mind. So that's what the Rava came along. This is how I'm going to prove it. Rava came along and said, in his opinion, the machlekes is only in the case of etel chavar. I will pay you. So since I haven't done it yet, I change your mind. But if I say I'm meichel you, the moment I say I'm meichel you, I walked away from it. I distanced myself from this. I severed my ties to it, and therefore I can no longer change your mind. Now the question is Rava who's Rava agreeing with? If you said Rabbi Yochanan is saying the machlekes is only if I'll give you, I can change your mind and I haven't given it. Everyone agrees you cannot change your mind. Then the Rabbi holds Rabbi Yochanan. If you're going to say bein bezu or bein bezu machlekes, but if you're going to say that the machlekes is bein bezu and bein bezu, which means that Rabbi Yochanan holds the machlekes is in both moichel And etin. So Rava says, my apologies. So Rava says, if the machlekes is in both, is Rava command? Who does he follow? He's not following not Rabbi Yechon, not Rabbi Yehuda Mishmor. Says he, what's the problem? Rava time of the Nafshikam. Why can't Rava have a third opinion? So we haven't verified what Rabbi Yechon holds. Eisvei Rab Acha Bar Tachlit Rava. So Rab Acha Bar Tachlit asked Rava a question. It says, let's say you owed your friend a shvua. Swear to me, swear to me on your life. And instead of swearing with a sefer Torah and everything else, just swear to me on your life. The mayor says, and then later he changes his mind. He can still change his mind and say, no, swear properly. And the Chachamim say, but he cannot change him. My love, what are we talking about here? We're talking about a case of mechila. He said, no, because most shvuos are, let's say, a moed b'miktzas. Swear and you're absolved. Swear and you're exonerated. My love, oisan hanishbain, they swear and they don't have to pay. In other words, it's mechila, and yet Mashiach machlekes are mechacham. You Rava said when it comes to mechila that everyone agrees. Sorry, that you said when it comes to mechila. That's like a machalach. It's a case of machalach, and you Rava said when it comes to machalach, everyone agrees. You cannot change your mind. And here clearly it says that this is the machlek of mechacham, and we're assuming you're talking about a case of machal that I'm mechal because most cases of a shul is I swear and I walk away. I potter. Look, no, we're talking about the oisen hanish boyin b'noitim. We're talking about a case where you swear and you're taking. This is the rarer shvua where you swear and you're actually collecting a case of et and lecha. I'm saying you swear a lighter shvua and I will pay you. This is the case of the employer who told the storekeeper, pay the wages to my employee, and the employees that never received, the storekeeper said, I gave it. Both of them swear and they collect. And that's what we're talking about. This is the case of et lecha, and that's why it's a machlek, but machalach, we're not talking about that. So no proof one way or another. Now the et lech says the Gemara about Tanya Leisha. Didn't we learn that the Dayanim are talking about? You just said that the case of the Dayanim is already a case of etlucha. Is why do you have to have a Tanya Leisha? Why do you have to have two cases saying the same thing? So we say we have two cases because they're not exactly the same. We would have thought that might be different. Tana, we learned. We're talking two cases of etlecha. And if we only knew one case that I will pay that I can change my mind on machlekes, we wouldn't know what the other case is. And the Gemara explains. Tana, we learned the case of toile b'das achedim. We learned the case where I said, if your father or my father they rule according to you, I will pay you. I will pay you. So that's etlecha where you're hinging on and basing on somebody else's decision. And then Vitana, we learned that I am telling this defendant, if you I'm telling the defendant, if you swear and what do you call it, I will pay you. So I'm now not depending on judges, depending directly on you. And the Gemara explained, we only knew the case what? That I accept whatever the judge's verdict is, then but how come but I would say, okay, in that case over there, if I said I'll pay you, I can change my mind. You know why? The Matzah you know why he can change his mind? He thinks to himself that how do I know which way the judge is going to go? Hopefully the judge will rule my way, and it'll never happen. That it'll never happen what you're saying here. That that the judge will come along and say that you don't have to pay. The who said that he was going to win, that he's going to have to pay. When he said etlecha, I will pay you, maybe he thought that it'll never happen. That's why he said it. So therefore, in that case over there, the mayor says, "Look, you can change your mind," because he didn't really mean wholeheartedly. When he said, "Yeah, I'll pay you," I'll pay you if they rule according to you. I'll pay you because he thought that he'll win. That's why he said it, just to move forward. But he really thought that he will win, so he never meant it. So I said you could change your mind. He said, I will tell you about that. But when he says to the other person, you swear that I owe you the money, and then I will pay you, then of course the guy is going to swear. That's what he's there for. He wants his money. So maybe the mayor is you cannot change your mind. Once I said it, I said it. The Ashmin only the case of of where the person I'm talking directly to the defendant, I tell him swear only this case. But in the case of the judges, maybe in the case of the judges, since he really didn't think that he'll ever end up paying, that he can change his mind. You need both. So no proof one way or another. Says further, this whole machlekes of Rameh whether you can change your mind or not is lifnei madin before they came to the final ruling. Once they gave a ruling, then you accepted them, you pointed them, and now they gave a ruling. You don't like it? Too bad. But then everyone agrees you cannot change your mind. Rabbi Yechon said, you can change your mind after the Gemardin, after the ruling as well, because they're not yet fixed. Since they're not qualified judges, you accepted them. So you can always retract. What would Rabbi Yechon hold? Belief before they gave the final. Everybody agrees on machlekes. Even hakol yochel but you change your mind. Machlekes in both. Toshma coming in. Rabbi said, "Kibul of Kari Apostle Mardin." The Rabbi said, if you makabel a karev or a puzzle before Gmardin, the Yachal Lachzabai, Rava came along and made a psak. If you accept that somebody's disqualified to be a judge, either a relative or somebody's puzzle, Lifnei Gmardin before the final judgment, Yachal Lachzabai, you can change your mind. Achig Gmardin, but once they gave the final judgment, you can no longer change your mind. So Rabbi gave up Sakdin, and he makes a distinction. Before the Gemadin, you could change your mind, and after Gemadin, you can't. Now let's see, who does he follow? If you're going to say Rabbi Yechon holds that after Gemadin is machlekes, I believe the Gemadin, before Gemadin, everyone holds you can change your mind because it has been a final sentence that not really qualified. Then the Rabbi make a ruling, and this follows Rabbi Yechon. Aliba the Rabbanan, this follows the Rabbanan, that's halacha. The Amri Bein Bezu Bein Bezu Machlek, you tell me that Rabba holds an argument in both. Then Rabba Drama Kaman, who does he follow? And you can't tell me it's a third opinion because he's giving a psak halacha. He's not giving, an opinion when they're arguing. Allah Shmam Alach Madi Machlek Shmam. It proves that that's Machlek is only Achig Madi. Sholach Le Rab Nachman Bar Rab Yitzchak Le Rab Nachman Bar Yaakov. I told you last says Machlek is Rashi and traces. Whenever it says in Rab Nachman, who is it? According to Taisus of Nachman bar Yaakov, according to Rashi, it's Rab Nachman bar Yitzchak. So Rab Nachman said, Rab Bar Chizo, Rab Yitzchak sent to Rab Nachman Yaakov, Yilamdeinu Rabbeinu, teach us. Lifnei Gemardin machlekes. Is the machlekes before the Gemardin? Or after Gemardin machlekes? This argument, Richtlish Lakish, what's the halacha? The halacha is even me. So he said, after Gemardin machlekes, the machlekes is only after the Gemardin. And that what? That you cannot change your mind. But prior to the Gemardin, everyone knows you could, like Rabba. Rav Ashi Amar Hachi Shalach. This is what he asked him. The etel l'cham machlekes, going back to the first argument we had, is the machlekes only in the case where he said, "I will pay you if the judges rule like you, I will pay you." That's the machlekes whether he changes his mind or not. Oy b'machalach machlekes. Well, the machlekes is in the case where he said, "I am meichel you." I am meichel. And he said in the case of Mochav, he says in the case where I am meichel you, that you just swear the less severe shvua, and I'm meichel, you don't have to pay anymore. That the machlekes is over there. That you can meichel, but it comes at everyone agrees that you couldn't change your mind. Halacha didn't me. Shulchan said back to him, the halacha is only the case where he says, I will pay you, that the machlekes is, but if he said, I'm meichel, then everyone agrees you cannot change your mind. But once I walked away, because that's what mechila means. Halacha didn't the Surah Masna Hachi, that's how I learned the Surah. But Pobedisa Masna Hachi, this is how I learned Pobedisa. I'm going to begin Basham, it sent the Shiva after Shmuel. After I passed away, Yilamdein teach us. Lifnei Gemardin. What happens before the Bezin Paskin? And we said before they can change their mind. But V'konu miyodei. They made a kinyan between themselves that this is it. We agree. We're not going to change. What happens then? Shalach said back to him, Ein la'acha kinyan klum. Once you made a kinyan, it's final. Next Mishnah, the Eilu Hein Absolum. We brought up that what if you accepted someone who's disqualified as a judge, it's all right. Who else considered disqualified? Now, obviously, it says in Pasuk, Atosha Yot in Russia 8, Atosha Russia 8, you should make a Russia 8. So obviously, someone who is a Ganav Mahatayra cannot be a witness, is disqualified from being a judge. If you cannot be a witness, you cannot be a judge, you cannot be a judge, you cannot be a witness. But we're also going to discuss here people who have a weakness for money. And even though it's only us and Rabbanan, we cannot trust because who knows how honest they are. And we'll see later Gemara whether B'chlal, a person committed an Aveda, where they can be a judge. Says the Mishnah, Eilen Absolute, the following are disqualified. Hamasache B'kuvi, somebody plays with dice, a gambler, cards. Hamalve Beribis. Right now we understand somebody lends money with interest. And the Gemara will explain how each one of these are only Asam B'Durabbanon. And what's the issue of gambling? We'll see in the Gemara as well. Mafricha yain. Mafricha yain, the Gemara will tell us of two ways of learning pshat. Either they're having a race between two doves or two pigeons, or you're using a pigeon to lure in other people's pigeons into your chicken coop or into your coat, your dove coat, so that you're stealing basically. But it's not. I will see in the Gemara why isn't that considered stealing from the Torah? The Seicher Shvi is those people who deal with Shemitah. The Torah says lachem la'achla, only for eating and not to do merchandise with. And again, in all of these things, we see that it's the lure of money that causes you to be corrupt. So how can we trust you to be a judge or a witness? Thinking about it further, first they called in those people gathering Shemitah, when we saw there were so many people there getting involved, and we'll talk more about it later. We call them merchandisers of Shemitah. Amar Yehuda, a Messiah, Yehuda argues. He says, when do we say a gambler is corrupt? This man she'ein lehem umnis elahu. This is the only trade that they have. And aval yesh lehem umnis. They have a trade. Kushayin. What's the idea of a trade? So Rashi and many Rishonim learn that if they're not involved in the ways of the world, they don't appreciate the value of money. And if they don't appreciate the value of money, then they have no idea, what it means to go into business, what it means to be a partnership. How can they give rulings on money? And plus, Rashi adds, they're not Yorei Shemayim, which is interesting. But if they have another trade, besides that, so they respect money, even though there might be gamblers and all that, they can be trusted to be a judge. I think Mar will explain this. What's wrong? A gambler, what's wrong? Plays dice, what's wrong? I'm going to have two opinions. It's an asmachta. I expected to what do you call it? Asmachta is that I didn't think this will ever eventuate. And I was sure it never happened. So now that it happened, I'm a reluctant giver, and therefore I'm like a god that's taking from you. And the fact so when I gamble, I thought I was going to win. Why did I gamble? Because I was sure I was going to win. And now that I lost and I'm giving you my money, it's like you're stealing from me, and vice versa. The smachta is not koina. However, Rab Sheish's Amar Kolke Hagavna Lava Smachta. That's not called a gambler is not an smachta. Why? And I will explain. Rab Sheish's Rashi learned other Shem are different. The main time was different. Rashi holds when you gamble, did you know for sure that you're going to win? Not at all. So from the beginning, you went into this sport, into this game, thinking there's a possibility you're going to lose, a possibility you're going to win, and therefore, if you went ahead and proceeded to play, you're prepared to give up your money. There's no geneva involved. When is it called a smachta? A smachta is where I was 100%. For example, I said, if I don't pay, I give it to a third party. I paid you $50 out of the $100 I do. And I said, don't interrupt the contract here. Give it to a third party. And I say to that guy, if I don't pay the balance, $50 within a month, you can give it back to the lender and he'll collect the entire $100 from me again, a second time. But when I said that, I was convinced that I would be able to pay the rest of the money. So that's a case of a smachta. The smachta l'kanya, I don't have to pay you the extra $50. I only have to pay you the balance I owe you. But in this case, in the chatchila, I didn't know if I was going to win or lose. Therefore, as if I'm prepared to give the money. That's what Rashi, how Rashi learns. Thinking about it further, and Rav Sheish says, no, it's not a smachta. But the problem is the fisher ain't asukin be yeshuva shalom. They're not doing the things yeshuva shalom. What Rashi learns means if they have no other business, they're not obviously involved in the yeshuva shalom. They have no other business whatsoever. They don't respect money, and therefore they can't be involved in adjudicating disputes, money matters, commercial. The Rambam has a very different shot. The Rambam learns That Yeshuva Shalom means that basically, does he use this money to live off, or the money that he wins he uses to play more games? If he uses this money to live off, then it's like a ganef. He's stealing, he's using the money, which is ganef. But if he doesn't use the money for himself, he has another job, so he doesn't need the money. For example, he uses the money just to accumulate more money so that he can play, to have enjoy the gambling sport. Then he's not a ganef, because he's not really using it for only a ganef. He's using it for his own personal benefit. But if he's not using it for his personal benefit, for example, he has another job, and he's just using this money to be able to gamble with, then he can't. Then he's not corrupt. What's the difference? He has another trade. Like we learned, Rabbi is spelling out. When we talk about Bisman Shein Lumas, he has another job. He has another job, Shein the Kasher. Rashi says why? Because he respects the value of money. According to the Rambam, he's not living off then this money. He's not a ganef. Alma time of the Maslis, you see that Yehuda is explaining the Mishnah Yeshuva Shalom. Nothing to do with because Asmacht is not kind of your ganef. It has to do with Yeshuva Shalom. So in fact, Kashal Rabachama. It's a Kashal Rabachama. It's a clear the Mishnah. Yehuda is explaining. Maybe he understood. Yehuda is actually arguing the Tanakama. That Yehuda is the one who introduces this idea of Yeshuva Shalom if he has another job. Not the Tanakama. Can't be, because Amar Yeshuva Levi from Malcolm Sha'amar Yehuda. Every Yehuda says the words Amosai or Bameh. Eina Ela Farish. He's only explaining the words of Chachamim. Rabbi Yechon Amar Amosai LeFarish or Bameh Lachlik. And Rabbi Yechon argues Levi. He says, if it says the word Amosai, he's coming to explain. If it says the word Bameh, coming to argue. But nevertheless, Kuli Alma Amosai LeFarish. Whoever said the word Amosai means explaining. Rabbi Yechon is explaining Tanakama. So nothing to do with Asmachta. Who cares? He has another job. He's still a ganef. Said Gemara, what's the problem? You're asking a kasha Rambam Bacham who says the ganef. Gavra Karamish. You're asking a question from one person to another. Marasova pligi and Marasova le pligi. He holds that the Yeshuva Levi says they're not arguing, and Bacham says they are arguing. Says the Gemara, how can you tell me that Yehuda is coming to explain the Chachamim, and therefore everyone agrees that it has nothing to do with a smachta, you're not a ganef, and the thing over here is merely because of Yeshuva Shalom? How can I even like they're arguing? But Tanya and elsewhere, Ben Shi Yeshle Umnas, whether he has another trade, Shaloihu, not besides gambling. Ben Shi Umnas, this is the only trade. How is it possible? Rabbi Yehuda clearly said even if you have another job, it's forbidden, which is not what Rabbi Yehuda said in our Mishnah. So we see there's another opinion. It was that opinion is actually Rabbi Yehuda, but the name of Rabbi Tarfon, and that is the Tanya learned. So there is an opinion that says that you're not allowed to gamble even if you have another job, and that's the view of Rabbi Tarfon. That's not the view of our Mishnah. Tanya learned. A guy is walking down the street, and two people are sitting there, and they make a comment. This guy had, let's say, had long hair. He says, I believe this guy's a Nazir. He goes, no, this guy's not a Nazir. Make a wager. So he said, you know what? I'll make a wager with you. If he's a Nazir, I will be a Nazir like him. And his friend said, you know what? I will say, if he's not a Nazir, if he is, then I'll become a Nazir. And the din is that neither of them become a Nazir. Why not? Tarfon said, because when they said it, they weren't convinced for sure that they didn't know the outcome. So they didn't know the outcome. It says in Pasuk Kiyafli Ish, it has to be clear cut. It's not clear cut. They didn't know the outcome. Nothing happens. So the same thing here by gambling. Since you didn't know if you win or not win, therefore it's like nothing happened. You had no right then to give the money or take the other person's money. If you did, you're a ganef. So it's an asmachta, and you had no right to take it. So there is such a view, and that's a tarfon. It was given only by flaw when it's clear cut. Okay, the next Gemara, which we'll learn tomorrow, we'll discuss each case in the Mishnah to see why it's only an Issa de Rabbanon. See you tomorrow.